Casual Magic has been sponsored by Quiver, maker of the Quiver and Bolt deck cases and other fine deck holding accessories. Use the code CASUAL on their website for 10% off your order. We're also sponsored by Architect, the premier site for hosting your decks on the internet. I love them and they love me, and it seems like a good reason for you to use them. You can also support Casual Magic directly by going to our Patreon at patreon.com/ShivanB. And now, on with the show. Hello and welcome to Casual Magic, the show where we talk about the fun side of Magic the Gathering. My name is Shivam, Bhatt, and Casual Magic is brought to you by Architect and Quiver. You can also support me directly at my Patreon at patreon.com/ShivanB. Please do, because I'm trying to get to go to Amsterdam, and these plane tickets are real expensive. It turns out Europe is far from America. I feel for all of you foreign Magic players who have to fly out here 3 times a year for pro tours and crap. Speaking of which, I actually am very lucky today to talk to somebody from about as far from me as you can get, deep in the west coast of Australia. So far away, they haven't gotten cameras there yet. I'm sorry.
I loved it. I loved it.
I'm God dang. That's so mean. I'm joined today by Anthony Lee, who is he was, I believe, like, you were the Australian regional champion. You were like 4th at Worlds or something like that. And I know that you're on Team Handshake, and you also co-host the podcast, the Karnies, with Javier Dominguez and Andrea Mengucci, right?
Yep, that's right. All of that's true.
I'm like, look, I know who my guests are. I really do. Well, it's fascinating to me because that podcast is wild because of how geographically disparate you guys are.
Yeah, Andrea Mengucci always said one of the best things of competitive Magic to him was interacting with people from all over the world. So this was something that this is like one of the ways for him to express that, which I really love. So that's one of the biggest appeals to us.
Yeah, but it's like, I mean, I guess Javier's in Spain, right?
Yep, he is.
Yeah, so at least him and Mengu have like a little bit of a time edge, but you must be recording at weird hours to get on with those guys.
Oh yeah, definitely. But we make it work. It's all good.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what I had you on here for is because you popped into my my sphere of understanding when I saw you at Worlds, just like come out of nowhere and suddenly just go on this crazy tear all the way up to starts. And it was delightful. It was so much fun to watch because a lot of the time, and this is one of the complaints I have for a person who sits and watches pro coverage all the time, is that a lot of pro players are very focused and are very serious and are very just chess players all the time, right? Like, and there's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, you have to be focused. You're at the top tier of the game, etc. But when somebody looks like they're having a good time, it stands out, you know? And I was like, who the hell is this dude I've never heard of before? I follow Pro Magic very closely, and obviously not close enough to understand all the players down in Anzac, but it was really cool to watch. I was really, really pulling for you the whole time. So congratulations on that. 4th place in Worlds is no joke, man.
Thank you so much. And thank you very much for saying that. I really appreciate that a lot. Like top 4 something, but to stand out like that is that's very special. Thank you very much for saying that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like sometimes players are memorable for like different reasons, right? Like obviously Luis Scott Vargas is memorable because he is Luis. He is like the entirety of everything. But then you've got like, Shota Yasuoka, who's just like, Iron Man, steel face, frozen cold all the time, and like the panoply of players in between. So like when somebody pops out, I'm always like very excited to take notice and see what's going on and find out who this person is. And plus I'm really curious to learn about Magic on in Australia, because cards are very expensive down there, aren't they?
Yeah, but kind of everything is, so it balances out.
I guess, yeah. Like y'all are far from a lot of stuff, and there's not a lot of water there. Yeah, but I mean, I've got family who immigrated from India to move to Sydney and stuff, and so I've heard a lot about what it's like to be an immigrant in Sydney, which is I mean, look, dude, I live in America, so their stories are all real
Yeah.
familiar. But like, it's like what my parents would have dealt with 40 years ago. Um, but yeah, so how did you find Magic? Where did you get into it?
Well, I think the same way that a lot of people would have gotten into it, where a friend of mine got me into it.
Mm.
I was playing a different card game, and he said, "Why don't you try Magic?" And I'd actually heard of Magic through playing that other card game because there were Magic
What
players
was
who
it?
played that card game. It was the World of Warcraft TCG.
Oh yeah, well, I mean,
Yeah, yeah. Hearthstone
the
with
game
paper.
made by Magic players, right?
Exactly. Yeah, like Brian Kibler, was the lead design for that. I believe,
Yeah.
and I'd heard of Magic because my two favorite players in the World of Warcraft TCG were Guillaume Maintenon and Guillaume Tapa. And it turned out
Uh,
they built. This is going to be hard to believe, but they built like these glacial control decks that I loved.
Walker
And then
Papa plays
yeah,
control.
yeah, I had no idea. They were my favorite players, and that was my favorite deck. And I found out they played Magic, so that was kind of an impetus for me to like look into the game as well. And yeah, went from there.
Do me a favor and lower your volume a little bit.
Oh, will do.
Yeah. But like, man, Wafo Tapa, I got to see him play in Worlds when it was in San Francisco a long time ago. And dude is just, like I was saying, one of those ice cold control players
Yep.
who's maybe one of the best of all time. Uh, yeah, I guess I don't know what they did after Magic, so it makes sense that they must have gone to play other card games because we are degenerate and this is all we know how to do.
Pretty much.
So, when do you know when it was? When did you pick up Magic?
It's funny.
What's that?
Whenever you ask a Magic player this, they always give the answer with a set, right? So I
Oh yeah,
remember that it was
I'm like,
World
what
Wake.
set
Yeah,
did you start with?
World
World
Wake.
Wake?
Yeah, it's a while ago.
Yeah, I started with the dark. Okay, so don't tell me
Oh,
about
okay.
when.
Okay, that's more. That's a bit more.
I'm
So.
like, don't tell me about when. Yeah, it's always funny to me because I'm so old. So whenever people are like, "Oh yeah, man, I started way back when, back in original Theros block," and I'm like, "Buddy,
That's wild.
original Theros block, come on, that's younger than my kid is." But yeah, like so. What Worldwake is a crazy set to start with, though, because that's like really fast and leading right into Rise of the Eldrazi, which is also
Mhm.
just an insane set. Because I came back to Magic right around that time, and I remember the first time I'd ever gone drafting was to play at a pub where they were doing draft of Rise of the Eldrazi, and the first pack I opened, the rare was Sarkin the Mad, and I'm like,
Oh.
what the hell is this? It's like it doesn't look like a creature. It doesn't say summon on it, and all the arrows are pointing downward. I'm like, I played it and I thought it had summoning sickness, and then the other dude just like killed it immediately. I'm like, what is the hell is this game? What happened, man? It was so
Uh,
weird.
It's one of
Um,
those things, right, where like that it's cool, but you're not sure why, right? That's
right.
how I feel. Yeah.
And it's like, a creature at least intuitively makes sense, right? Like I put it
Mhm.
out, and you say, okay, you can't attack yet because it's just been summoned. I'm like, all right, fine, that makes sense. I put this dude out. What is that dude? Who is he? What's he doing?
He's the mad, apparently.
Yeah, and that card is what? Well, I know now that card is very good. Also, Rise of the Eldrazi doesn't play like a normal Magic set. Kind of bizarre.
Definitely.
So, I'm curious. How did you get like? So, when did you start playing competitively? Then.
I guess I've always been sort of a competitive person, so I would say I tried to start playing competitively relatively quickly after I started playing Magic. I think I
Mm.
qualified for my first Pro Tour maybe a year or a bit more than that after I started playing,
Holy
so
crap,
I got sucked in pretty quickly.
man! I've been playing for like almost 30 years, and I've still not qualified for my first Pro Tour. Uh, Mind you, I don't actually play anywhere where
Yeah.
I could qualify.
That makes sense. Yeah, a lot of it's geography. I mean, a lot of it's just trying, right? Like,
Right.
yeah.
So, what's the scene like in Australia? Like, because I know that a lot of good players have come from there, like folks like Riley and
Mhm.
other people like that. And I'm just like, so, and you live far out on the other side. So I know a lot of players are over on the Sydney side and stuff. Is there a scene in Perth or in like the west coast of Australia?
A little bit. It's quite healthy for like the size, I think, which kind of
Mm.
makes sense. Like Australia, so it's very distant from everywhere, but we have relatively affluent population centers, and they're all very
Mm.
concentrated. which
Yeah.
makes reasonable conditions to make like a disproportionately large Magic scene. So
Right.
it worked quite well here. Yeah, Wizards treats us well
But
as well.
mm, did you? Well, yeah, that's true. Did you guys? So like, did you have to like travel to the other big cities to go play in like PTQs or something like that?
Often. So so from where I live, when I started, we would get one PTQ a year,
Mm.
and that was all I had basically. So I qualified for the PTs. So the first PTs I qualified for were a very large space apart because I won three of them, but they were obviously a year apart. So
Mm.
that was all I had. But then they changed the system to one that allowed you to try to qualify every season without necessarily committing to traveling
Mm.
for a PTQ. So it ended up working out.
Well, that's pretty handy because, like, I know one thing when I've talked to players outside of the states, like, we don't understand how lucky we have it over here, where it's like you can have regional qualifiers in every state and PTQs everywhere, and like we can qualify, and like the tournaments are literally in our country for the vast majority of them. And so when I hear about folks like Paulo who has to come from the bottom of the planet to come up here,
It's
or
incredible.
it's completely nuts to me. Like some of these like the lengths people go to make it out here, like the especially when you see like players from China or Korea or the
Mhm.
Philippines or something. It's like it is prohibitively expensive to fly out to like Chicago or
Definitely.
Minnesota or whatever, and then to figure everything out and be like, oh, this is like my fourth language that I have to navigate and learn how to like playing Magic in foreign languages with foreign players is some. I think people don't respect how difficult that is. Not that you guys speak foreign language in Australia, but I was just thinking about like the Thai players or the people in Costa
Mhm.
Rica who play Magic. And you're like, damn, that's like you have to learn a second language to play this game and to be able to like converse with people and understand what's going on. And then you go to a tournament and the dude sitting in front of you is German, and you're like, I don't now what?
That's honestly one of the best things I think. Something that you
Mm,
notice is that a lot of these players actually end up learning English really quickly just by immersion. This when through being able because so much of competitive Magic is a lot of intensive
yeah.
communication. They learn really really quickly, which is great. Like
Yes.
if you met Mengu when he qualified for his first PT, you would probably barely have understood him, and now he's totally good, right? So
He's completely
yeah,
fluent.
yeah.
I mean, I had the pleasure of meeting Shota at Vegas this year, and he's
Mhm.
like one of my favorite players of all time. I lived in Japan for a while, so I can speak Japanese
Oh,
passably.
awesome.
And I was going up to him and talking to him, and he switches to English, and I was just like, "Holy crap, he speaks English! Oh my god, I don't know what."
I
And
didn't know
I
he
like,
spoke English.
well, enough to at least say greetings and hello and stuff like that.
uh,
And I'm like,
fair.
I tried to play Magic when I was in Japan. It's very hard.
Oh
It is
yes.
very like they don't teach you Magic vocabulary in college when you're learning the
Somehow
language.
they were so accommodating though, so there's a bit of a give there, but yeah, that's definitely very difficult, especially for the Japanese. I think it's
Yeah.
more of a language barrier there. I find.
Yeah, especially I mean, that's one of the reasons why I think it's wild to me. Like, I mean, they're one of the languages I think Watsi will always print cards in just because the Japanese scene is so big and vibrant. But it's always like when you go and play with a large group of Japanese players, it's complicated.
Mhm.
But I mean, whatever. That's you're not Japanese. I'm going to ask you about
That's
the
all good.
Japanese Magic scene. I don't know. I was thinking about foreign players now. Um, have you gone to like Southeast Asia for other PTQs and events and stuff like that?
Yeah, I traveled to some. I traveled to some GPs when those were a thing in Southeast Asia, and I've traveled to Japan quite a few times for pro tours there. Yeah,
Mm. What was that experience like? Like
it
as a
was
native English speaker to go out and explore these other places.
It was pretty great. I mean, like a lot of the appeal of Magic is like getting to see different places, and
Yes.
well, that was definitely part of it as well, right? Like, um, especially because Southeast Asia is next to Australia, so it kind of feels like
Yeah.
I should get to know my neighbors a bit, right? It was great, yeah. And English was like, for example, in Singapore, everybody speaks perfect English,
Well,
so
yeah.
yeah, like
Singapore is my favorite city, man. Love
I
that
love it.
place.
Yeah, that might be my favorite place in all of Southeast Asia. Even the airport's great,
Yeah,
Um,
dude. I have spent a lot of time in Changi. I am a big
yeah.
fan of that airport.
Best in the world, best in the world.
Oh god, the food is so good.
Yeah.
But yeah, because Singapore is like the halfway point between the States and
Mhm.
India. So like for my whole
Oh,
life, I've gone and spent like a day hanging out in Singapore and then going off to the motherland, and it's very weird. But Singapore's a cool city, man. It's like it feels like San Francisco if it was clean and had better food. Um, yeah. Because what gets me is like I'm just trying to fast forward through your past because I want to get
Mhm.
to the interesting stuff to me, which is the fact that you're on Handshake, which is one of the
Yep.
best teams in Magic right now,
I'd say so.
hands down.
Yeah, I think everybody who's part of the competitive Magic scene who isn't on Team Channel Fireball or a family member of Team Channel Fireball would definitely agree with you.
Yes, that is probably true. I mean, to be fair, CFB, they're very good, and they've been very good for a very, very long time
Oh, I agree.
because literally the best players of all time are on that team. What do you want? But you guys seem to like in the past 3 years or so, Handshake has come out of nowhere and just put up numbers left and right, and it's an incredibly just cool team full of like young people, and I just really enjoy that a lot. So,
Thank you.
can you? So, tell me what was it like winning the Australian regionals? First off,
It was well. I never imagined that it could happen. Well, certainly, I like maybe you kind of have like obviously when you enter the tournament, you have a theoretical idea that you might win, but you never really
well,
think about actually winning. Like
right,
so it was a little bit surreal as well, especially because well, I felt very confident because I prepared so much with Javier going in. So Javier's
Mm,
like, you're one of the best players in the room, and we've prepared a lot,
right.
so you're going to do well. I said, okay, sure. And so the Swiss part was good, but then in the top eight, I just had like a horrendous matchup that I'd never played before on the draw.
Oh no,
I'd have to figure out everything on the fly. And luckily, I did have like while I went to sleep because of the whole time zones thing. And this is one of the advantages of being in different time zones. I had Javier working with the other Spaniards overnight to tell me everything
oh,
I needed
gee.
to know when I did wake up. So that got me through. But because at the start of the day, I'd already been like, well, this is already not looking very good for me. And then yeah, I'd already from that morning felt like I wasn't going to win. So,
That's crazy.
yeah, it was particularly something.
So, like, I'm curious about that though, because like they weren't at the tournament. So, did you just say like, look, these are what my matchup, these are who the top eight is. Tell me how
Yep,
to do this,
yep,
and
exactly.
then they
So
just didn't crunch it.
yeah, that's kind of been our standard procedure for a long time. Like we've done that for each other across all kinds of tournaments. So, for example, in the World Championship that Javier won, it was the same thing. Like he'd never played against Shahash and Ha playing Godfarer's Gift before. So me and Li Tian were testing the matchup online while Javier slept. So when he woke up, we could debrief him on everything. So
Actually,
yeah, that's how we do it.
that's a good segue because that's one of the things I've actually been really curious about because I remember when I was talking to Reed Duke about like top eights and stuff, and he's like, "Yeah, man, I go and I get a good night's sleep, and my teammates go and grind the matchups for me." Can you tell me a little bit about what that process is like? Like, if you know that, like, for instance, Javier is going up the next day to play, how do you guys? What do you do? What is that process to kind of prepare for somebody else's matches?
So the biggest thing I think there is communication. So it only works if you can communicate really well with that particular
Mm,
person. Like you kind of have to understand what sorts of things, like what you have to say to get an idea across to them clearly. And
mm,
it's also on their end as well. So for example, something that Javier is really good at doing is identifying the questions he needs to ask to fill in what he doesn't know. So for
mm,
example, he would ask me very specifically, if this happens, what would you do in this spot? And from there, he would try to extrapolate. So he doesn't have to have played the games himself necessarily
mm.
because he has enough of a theoretical understanding that he can try to bridge that gap. So, I mean, obviously he would rather have played the games, but it's not an option
Sure.
in the context every time, right? So,
Right.
the goal is for the people testing to be able to clearly distill what matters in the matchup and then communicate it. So, I mean, if I understand it but I can't communicate it, it's not really helpful. So,
Right.
yeah, that's
Like, you gotta be able to sit there and say,
counts.
like, "Hold your counter for this spell and not this one."
Yes, exactly. And when, but, or maybe if the circumstance in which to deviate from that, right, which is
Right.
really important.
Or it's like,
So, yeah,
mulligan this hand against this player type of thing.
yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah,
So,
like, I mean sorry, go ahead.
oh, no, yeah, no, I think I was about done there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, because like, it just because that's the sort of thing that it's so daunting to think about because of the amount of trust involved and the
Mhm.
amount of like not just trusting like that your that your team is gonna go through the reps, but trusting that their skill level is going to match whoever it is you're playing against or be at a tier that you can sit there and say like, okay, well, I know that you can play this deck as good as Luis would be able to when he's sitting against me, so I trust that whatever you've come up with is going to help me in this match against him. That is like a level of just it's so daunting to consider. You know, like
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to think about. Like your teammates, if they mess up, you don't have a game.
Yep. Yep. It's you have to put a lot of trust in each other for that. Absolutely. That's a key word that you mentioned there. Trust, I think, is super, super important. And also there's some degree of forgiveness as well, because we all understand that not all each of us is not always going to get it right. So we have definitely told each other to do things that are bad. Like, you know, each of us, the worst card that each of us has ever registered was probably put there by the other person. But that's okay, you know. Like you just have to let it go, move on, and you know they're going to be right more often than not. That's what matters. So we also have to be not too judgmental when things don't go right.
Yeah, there has to be some tier of forgiveness, right? Like you have to just be able to sit there and say, like, look, man, we did our best, and they came up with some tech we've never seen before. What you gonna do?
Just happens.
Because obviously they're doing the same thing you are, right? Like they're grinding out and trying to figure out the way around your deck. How did you get involved with these players in the first place?
With Handshake? So specifically with Handshake, I think it started from the previous World Championship, where I believe Jean-Emmanuel Duprat was meant to be testing with Handshake, but had to bow out. And they asked, and they thought about getting someone else to replace him in terms of just the workload for Magic. And because the World Championship was so small, they had to look for players outside it, and they came across me and Javier and asked us to help them for Worlds. And that was the Worlds before I won my regional championship. So when I won my regional championship and qualified for the Pro Tour, they were like, well, this guy helped us for the previous Worlds, and he was helpful, so we'll ask him back for this Pro Tour.
What year what Pro Tour was that?
The one that Nathan won.
Okay, that was...
I think that was the previous one, right?
One in March Machines?
That was the Pro Tour. He won the World Championship before that.
Yeah.
He does a lot of winning.
Yeah. Like,
hang on.
Nathan Sawyer win?
You know what? I'm going to look it up by looking up the card Duelist of the Mind, right? So it should say it on there, right? Oh, it just says number 28. He's the world champion number 2. So whichever world championship was before the one.
He played against Eli Cassis.
That's it. Yes, he played against Eli Cassis. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so it was 22. So
awesome.
Shieldred. But everyone is shieldred, so like that doesn't really help.
It does seem that way.
Yeah, no, God, I hate Grixis decks so much. It's just like I'm not gonna waste your time with that. But Shieldred, this rotation, they're like, we're gonna make it longer. Great, so we're stuck with the worst, most miserable ass cards to play with for another year. Thank you.
They do diminish in impact over the year, I guess. Like right now, Shieldred's not particularly played right now, oddly enough, in Standard. So. It was really oppressive for a little while, and then it like fell off a bit. Now it's maybe it'll come back soon.
I shifted over to Pioneer because I was just like tired of getting my butt handed to me by freaking swamps all day long. God, dude. Yeah, there's something about just having your hand ripped to pieces that just gets really, really annoying. It was bad when we were kids, and it was like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna play Disrupting Scepter and him to Turok, and shut up and die and take your Megrim and go to hell. Anyways, sorry. I've just
good.
Dude, I faced too many Dark Rituals into Hypnotic Spectre turn 1, and then you're just like, what do you want from me?
I think I dodged all that. It was well gone by the time World Wake was around.
Yeah, like it turned out by then they realized that not being able to play your cards is not a good way to get people to play Magic. Yeah. So they moved on from that. But yeah, so like you joined in, like what had you, if you hadn't done regionals at that point, how did they know to find you?
Oh, so I used to be on a team MTG Mint Card before.
I know those guys were.
Yeah. So I was on Mint Card before, and that's how they knew me. So for
that's
example,
also
Simon
probably
Nielsen
why your handle is Bent Card.
It is, because that's a funny story too, actually. Because I don't know if you remember the Pro Tour Team Series. Yeah. So obviously we had 2 teams because you had to be divided in groups of 6, and MTG Mint Cards, there was Channel Fireball, Fire, and Ice, Mass Drop East and West, and we had MTG Mint Card's plan was to have MTG Mint Card and MTG Near Mint Card, but then I qualified for the Pro Tour by top 4ing GP Kuala Lumpur, and then they were like, and Li Shitan was like, well, we can't really have him wear a shirt that says Near Mint because the way I shuffle my cards just ruins them. So we became MTG Mint Card and Bent Card instead. And that just stuck.
I respect it. I love it. That's awesome, man. MTG Mint Card was an awesome team too. I really
great.
I loved watching those guys because Li Shitan is probably one of my like favorite players to watch ever since his Blue Moon, that deck he did in Modern or whatever was so good. Um, was it called Blue Moon? I don't remember
Yeah,
the one
yeah.
where
It was Blue
yeah,
Moon. Yep.
like
One of his
now
favorites.
seriously, not having video here is really psyching me out because I don't have any facial recognition. So now I'm just talking into the air, and it's like
So
the
good.
olden days when I used to do this. But yeah, dude, man, he's a great player too. Uh,
Fantastic.
and have you worked with him for a long time?
Yeah, I have. Shitown was like he had a very open policy in terms of like being willing to try out new people, which is how I got onto
Yeah,
Mincut in the first place. Like he would always give people from this general region a go. I think.
yeah,
So that's how I got into Mincut. Then I made a good impression, and they kept me. But without Shitown being willing to take that risk in the first place, I probably wouldn't have been able to do that.
yeah.
But yeah, he's a phenomenal player. And he always explains things in a slightly cryptic way. He's like some ancient Asian
Yes.
sage, but like he'll say the weirdest things, and then you have to think about it, and it will make sense. He'll say things like "burn is control," and you'd be like, "I don't know what that means," but eventually you'll figure it out. But you need to figure. That's on you.
But it is though. I mean,
It is, yeah.
damn it. Okay, now I'm gonna sit and like meditate on that koan for a minute.
He has a lot of them.
His his play styles is just a lot of fun to watch.
Yep, very
And
much.
it's very like mahjongy. It's very slamming the cards on the table. I love to see it. But yeah, though, was it like intimidating though when you're like joining up with like Javier Dominguez is literally one of the best players, or like the rest of the people on the Handshake who are just incredibly solid?
Yeah, it was definitely a little bit. Javier, not so much, because I've actually worked with Javier for a really long time. So
Oh,
I met up with Javier and we started working together before he had his big break. So at the time, he was just a random Spanish player on MTG Midcard. Like literally on MTG Midcard, Javier was the one person who I didn't recognize. Right when he joined up. So, but we ended up hitting it off really well, and then we kind of split off to do our own thing for a long time, which is why me and Javier were a pair when we joined Handshake. So by then, it wasn't as intimidating, I'd say. I mean, it always is because you're just like, wow, there's all these fantastic players. But by then, it wasn't as unusual, I think. So, but it's still
weird sometimes
crazy,
to think about the fact that like some of these guys are just like, oh yeah, that's just a scrub player I knew, and now it's like, oh yeah, no, he's like, going to be first ballot Hall of Fame when he makes it in.
Yeah.
And he's got his face on a card. It's like, okay, buddy. But I mean, to be fair though, like Tolarian Community College is one of my best friends, and we came up to Magic together, and suddenly he's the biggest name in Magic, and I'm like, well, I guess that's just kind of how it goes sometimes.
Yeah, and he's still that guy to you, I assume, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
yeah. So I think it is always a little strange trying to reconcile those things, like especially like walking with Javier and Mengu through a convention hall. How many times you get stopped? It's that really drives it home.
It's yeah, I know the feeling. It's very weird. Yeah, because I mean, if I'm walking with like I don't know Josh and Jimmy, suddenly they're like the rock stars of Magic who are going to be going on stage, and everybody's mobbing us in every direction. I'm like, it's good times. It's weird. What do you think about the fact that these MagicCons are now mixing together my half and your half of the game?
I love it so much. I really,
Isn't it so
really,
good?
I think it's awesome. And it's like, for me, like from the very first one in Philly, it really struck home to me because I saw Mark Rosewater and I was like, that's like a fixture of Magic, the face of
Right?
Magic, basically. I've never seen that guy. I've played the Pro Tour for so long. So like, I just see like LSB or like PV or something. I'm like, oh, that's LSB or PV. But then I see Mark Rosewater. I'm, oh my gosh, I've never seen this guy. And so that was exciting. And I thought that was awesome because I thought, well, it must work the same way, the other way as well. Like all these people that have never interacted with each other get to do it now. And I mean, that's what we're talking, right?
Yeah, dude, seriously. Yeah. People don't understand. They're like, oh, look, you're such a big deal in casual Magic and people want to, get your autograph and stuff like this. I'm like, yeah. And then I go to the PT area where nobody knows me and Frank Carson walks by and I'm just like, holy crap, it's Frank Carson. Oh my God. And, it's just like, I remember Simon Nielsen was at the end of Chicago. At the end of Chicago, after he came off and got second place or whatever in the PT, and he goes into the hall, and I'm playing in a content creators chaos draft, and Gavin Verhey is sitting next to me, and there's a handful of other people who are my friends and colleagues, and we're just sitting there chaos drafting. And Simon comes up, and he's like, "Oh, I know Gavin," so I'll go sit down. And he's looking around, it's like, "Huh." These are celebrity chaos draft. I don't know any of the people here. I guess I know Gavin. Oh, and I know Shivam. And I'm like, why the hell do you know who I am? Like, I am literally nobody. And you're like one of my favorite players to watch. What's going on? And he's like, you tweet a lot. I'm like, fair.
That's a good story. Makes a lot of sense too, honestly.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's embarrassing. But no, you're right though. It's like before the Pro Tour was totally inaccessible to a lot of folks like me because I would go to GPs or whatever, and I'd never get to see the pro except playing on YouTube. And now I can sit and watch the tournament, and it's like the coolest thing in the world to be standing next to Sam Black, well, like birding like a match between like I don't know, two Japanese grades or something like that. You're like, what is happening? This is so cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, I think I think a lot of pro players love it as well because, for example, like we get to interact way more with. Well, I mean, obviously, other pro tours, it feels like you're with only like people who are sort of colleagues.
You
Or
go to
whatever.
work.
Now, yeah, there's lots of people who you've just never seen who like let us know things. Like I had a lot of people come up to me and say, "I really appreciate what you do on the Karnies. I loved watching you at Worlds, and that's awesome because I never had that experience before." Right?
Isn't it
so
great?
that was really. I don't know. That was really heartwarming. So, and Magic, that's possible because of MagicCon.
Yeah, dude, I love that. It's like we do all these things into the void, and we don't realize that people are actually listening until they come up to us and they're like, "Dude, that was amazing. Thank you so much." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm not just doing this for myself. I forgot."
That was a really good reminder of that. Yeah,
yeah, it's awesome, man.
definitely.
I love to hear it. So so now that you guys have been on Handshake, you have put up insane numbers. You've got like obviously Nathan Stoyer won, like Simon Nielsen's been winning 4 top 8s, which is like just ridiculous. Ridiculous.
Really? Absolutely.
And
I mean, virtual broken record, like wow.
Like I'm going to be talking to him after I talk to you actually, and awesome. I'm just very excited. Not today, but like for my next episode, and I'm very, very excited about that. But yeah, like I mean, wasn't even PV on your team?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, well, it was, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, I guess now he's just married and living a happy life of being Hall of Famer world champion.
He is. Yeah, he might be back at some point. He helped us for the last PT.
So, but okay, so you guys are all over the planet. How do you actually do anything as a team?
We just have to try to be organized about it, I guess. We try to. I think that's the power of Discord. I guess we just try to be disciplined in arranging these meetings. And it works out. I mean, part of it is yeah. Part of it is that we just literally go to all physically be proximate to each other in a testing house. So even though we could just stick to playing online, it's important for us to all go to the same house, the whole classic rent a massive house and put like 12 people in there, have them play Magic. And a lot of that is about just all being in the same place at once is really helpful for that process. And it helps with like building those bonds and whatnot that we think is super important.
Yes. Again, that's the whole trust thing of being able to, and it also probably makes it a lot easier when you're testing for the top 8 and you know that the guys are in literally the next room playing the reps. Like, do you have like all the decks on hand? How do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just
or proxies or something.
Yeah, we just use a lot of the time we use playtest cards, or we can have people test on, like, even if we're literally on laptops facing each other in the same building.
Magic Online exists.
Yeah, that's still that often we have to do if for in that kind of situation. It kind of depends on the context. Like we'll play with the playtest cards if we need to kind of get that visceral practice for the Pro Tour itself. But if we just need to understand something on an abstract level, often Magic Online's a bit faster, so we use that.
Yeah. But like sometimes when you're practicing draft or something, it helps to actually have the packs in front of you.
You absolutely have to
go through the like. Did you have a challenge when you first started going into like Pro Magic and having them say like, you have 30 seconds to look at the pack, pass your cards, and put it down and do the whole like rhythm and everything?
So much so, like it really melts your brain if you haven't practiced it, and if it's the first time, you're also like super nervous because it's your first Pro Tour and whatnot. So it's super nerve wracking, right? That's a specific thing that we practice a lot in the house. So I'll do an impression of one of our favorite Pro Tour judges, Riccardo Tessitore, and call the drafts. And we try to run things the same way that we expect at the Pro Tour. So we kind of know because you have to get used to that. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, because like Kibler was telling me, he's like, it's like second nature once you come back and you know what you're doing, but you have to go through so many reps to even get like. I don't draft like that. Like people don't realize you don't get to see the cards between your picks, which is so weird to me because I'm just used to Arena. It shows you all the cards you have. And you're like, well, you better know what color you're in because you're not going to be able to look. And it's like, oh, no.
There's so much processing power you need, and that's just to be able to play the game on a base level, right? Like you need to be able to remember everything that you have and that you've seen, and that's so that you can make the decisions, which is the hard part. So the easy part is supposed to be remembering everything, and that's not easy at all. So it's really, really tough. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, what would you say has been like? Do you find yourself to be more of a limited player or more of a constructed player?
Much more of a constructed player. So much so that this is how Javier and I met. When we were drafting in the house the first time, we were both on mint card.
Mm.
Javier saw my draft decks and he said, when it comes time for us to test constructed, I'm going to follow whatever you do because I know you're on the team for a reason. It's probably not draft.
Get wrecked, buddy.
Javier has always just been very brutally honest. He really just did that. He really meant that sincerely, and to his credit, he did. He really did. We just followed each other blindly and constructed, and that led to a wonderful, very long and fruitful working relationship. And but the genesis is a good story.
Sorry, buddy, you suck at draft, so you're here for a reason.
Yeah.
Let me figure out what that reason is. I mean, that's a Magic player right there.
It is.
That is such a Magic player story because you're just like, look, obviously they put this card in for some reason. Let me figure out why it's here and break
it. Game is gonna game.
Oh my god. What has your experience on the Pro Tour been like as of recently? It's like with the so you came off like, what was it like playing at Worlds, man?
That was incredible because at that point I've played like a lot of Pro Tours, obviously, and each Pro Tour is still very special. But Worlds was just something I'd never done before, and there's something special about it. Like obviously in an objective sense, like it's a little bit harder to qualify for Worlds and play in Worlds than a Pro Tour, sure. But I think it's it's kind of the intangible World Championship sort of title. And something that I've talked about with a bunch of my teammates is that the reason we think Worlds is so special is that anyone in your life, even outside of Magic, can immediately understand the value and impact of a World Championship. Like a Pro Tour, like, I mean, sure, there's the word pro, but like it kind of implies that you need a lot of knowledge to understand it fully.
Right.
World Championship, everyone knows that. Everyone knows what a World Champion is. So, yeah, I think
I mean, I just remember when PV won his World and like he posted a picture of that bus in Brazil that got his face on it. And I'm just like, everybody knows what a world champion is. Like,
exactly.
You may not know the champion of what, but that doesn't really matter. It's like world. I am the best at something.
Exactly. So that's the best thing. That's how I tell people who don't play Magic how good Handshake is. I tell them how many world champions we have, and then they get it.
Fair, dude. Jeez, that's a hell of a brag, man. But yeah, so what was it like? Walk me through it. What was it like to actually come here and like fly out to the world's Philly?
Vegas.
No, it was Vegas.
Yep.
Yeah. So, walk me through what that was like. Like, you won the RC in Australia, and then you were like, okay, well, I got to prep for this. And the world is different because it's way smaller than like a Pro Tour.
Yeah.
And it's a much smaller field, and you're playing against a lot of people more often. So what was that like?
It was like pretty surreal, I think. I think Vegas itself was already quite surprising because I'd never been there, and I guess if you've never been to Las Vegas, I didn't. It was a lot. Yeah, I did not. As soon as I stepped off the airplane, I'm like, okay, this is a lot. But
dry for one thing.
Yeah. So that actually reminded me of home. Actually, Perth is quite a similar climate. Yeah,
you're
desert
Australia,
cities.
Of course, one place has got less water than Las Vegas does.
But like the World Championship itself was wild. Like the testing process was great. And that like to us, the testing process is a lot of the tournament because it's just, guaranteed good times, and you never know how the tournament goes, but you always know that the testing house is going to be a lot of fun. So then we got to the house, and I'm playing like my comfort deck, so I'm even like not necessarily, I feel like sort of confident, but not really, because obviously when you go to a tournament, you kind of hope that you have like, you found it, you broke it, you found like an amazing deck. But me and Javier were just like, well, we don't really know what's good. So the thing is, we knew our deck was definitely not the best choice, just the one that was best for us because we were the most comfortable with it. So that was also like a little bit daunting as well. And yeah, like you sit down, they put the cards in front of you for the draft, and you're like, all right, this is starting. This is, you're just nervous every round. It's just, it was hard to believe going through. Yeah.
Yeah, and like the people you're playing against are the literal cream of the crop, best possible. So it's just probably that tier of like, I don't know, psychological damage. Is
definitely, yeah. Although that's also exciting. That's part of why I was having such a good time. Because if I play against like a great opponent, like it doesn't really matter whether you win or lose in a sense, because it's still an experience, right? Like even if I get crushed by Reed Duke, and I can tell you I've got crushed by him the first 2 times, it's great. Like it's just fun. Like you're just like, I'm on I'm at the World Championship playing as a Reed Duke. Like, it's cool, you know.
Right? And to be fair, though, you did like you trounced him. Well, I mean, not trounced. It was 3-2, so that's a grinder of a match.
Oh yeah, it was a reverse sweep too. I lost the first 2 games, so
oh man, to come back after the sideboard.
The full sweat.
Oh god, and
Go on,
against
sorry.
like literally one of the best players of all time.
Yeah.
That's a hell of an experience just by itself. Even if you had washed out that round, to be able to, you would have been like, "Yo, I lost to Reed Duke, so I don't feel bad about that." Right?
Absolutely.
Like, and he was playing friggin' Atraxa, so it's just like a hell of a deck on top of that. Oh, I love that domain round pick. That's super fun. It feels like a commander game when you're playing.
Definitely. Definitely.
But I mean, like, but you got to play against Depraz, who won the whole thing. So, but his Esper Legends deck was also pretty crazy too.
Yeah, it wasn't even that much on our radar. We thought everybody else was going to be playing. We thought that there were a few different versions of Esper, and we thought the other one would be more popular. We definitely hadn't prepared as much for the ones that the French players brought, so that was a bit different for us as well. But it was a great deck, and the prize immaculate as a player, like even from the MPL
so
days.
Good.
Yeah,
he is so good. It's so fun to watch him play, but he's just so focused, and he reminds me of like classic French players. Like there's like the guys who just. I mean, in the 90s, who were just like insanely good. And also, it was just fun to see Willie Adel again at the top 8, even though he didn't make it all the way.
He's so nice. He's so good. And he's so nice.
He's just like, I'm glad he's in the Hall of Fame. He deserves it for just what he has done for his community.
100%.
God tier. So, man, but that must have been awesome, though, to come out and be like, yo, I made top 4 of Worlds.
It was just incredible. Like the whole time, like even like from day one when I started out I was at the top of the Swiss out after day one. And even then I was like, this is crazy. And then I had, obviously you start getting bombarded by all these messages and you're thinking, wow, it's like incredible to have all this support. But then you're like, oh, also, and I hope I don't fumble the bag from here. It's a bit tough. But then then there's a featured draft and I was sitting in between Gabriel Nassif and Reed Duke. And that was like, I was already like, well, you gave me this seat. This is incredible. And then they told me you're the featured drafter. And I was like, it's these two guys on my left and right. I'm not Li Tian, right? Like, is there a mistake or something? Like,
but that must have been an intimidating. Like when you're passing to Reed Duke, what do you like? You're like, oh god, every card I'm going to give him is going to win. What am I doing?
Yeah.
Oh my god. Oof, that's a rough one. But that must what a triumph, man! Congratulations. That was an awesome like event, and I'm glad that you haven't like faded out from there. Like you've been still playing, jamming, and obviously, like the Karnies is a really really cool show, especially because like the three of you have such depth of knowledge and are so good at sharing it. It's like it's fun to listen to. I really enjoy it.
Oh, thank you. I didn't realize you listened to it because I thought we were like explicitly competitive, I guess. So I really appreciate you knowing that.
Man, I don't need people to tell me about Commander. Right? Like,
that makes sense.
So when I'm listening to Magic stuff for fun, it's always like I listen to limited resources. I used to listen to basically Patrick Chapin and friggin' Michael Flores talking about like hyper niche standard decks or whatever, just because like I mean, like I know what my expertise is, but I don't know what yours is, and I want to listen to you tell it to me. So yeah, no, I do. And plus, Mangucci is just great. I love listening to anything he does.
Consummate entertainer. He's amazing.
Yeah. So how did you guys come up with that, or like what's the genesis of starting this?
It was actually just Mangu's idea. He just really wanted to do a podcast together, and eventually he managed to browbeat me into doing it. So Mangu usually gets his way.
You know what, man? The guy is charming, and it's hard to like you lose to the Italian every time.
Every time.
But that's awesome though, because like I'm glad that it's nice to hear these like a lot of the more pro tour podcasts, like or the more hyper competitive podcasts, tend to lend on the cynical side of things a lot more often than not. And the reason I enjoy it is because I know that Mangucci is like the least cynical magical player I've ever seen.
Absolutely.
Like he's like one of the few other guys like me who's just like, I'm here because I love the game. Unlike me, he's actually also good at the game. But it's just like it's lovely to hear people who enjoy talking about this and can go into depth in a fun way. Like that's so rare. Like a lot of times you hear podcasts who are just like 4 dudes yelling at each other about how crappy draft is or whatever. I'm like, dude, sit down. Just we don't need to hear your Discord chat. It's fine. Go and vent to your buddies and leave us alone. But yeah, like So, what do you guys talk about for my listeners who are more casual bent?
No worries. So most of the episodes we do are just kind of filling in, sort of like a news report, I guess. Like we look at what's happened in competitive Magic lately. So we look at new results, new decks that have come out, new developments in tech. And Mangu tends to
Mm,
like lead that, and then we kind of see what me and Javier have to say about that as well. So Mangu will put forth what he thinks, and then we'll kind of fill that in. And part of the reason we did that, we do this podcast and thought that it might be appealing, is that we all have pretty different perspectives. So like you say, like we're not necessarily too cynical, but I'm definitely, me and Javier are definitely leaning a bit more on that compared to Mangu. That like Mangu is just like this beacon of positivity all the time, and we're a
Mangu
little
is
bit less.
so positive that
Yeah.
he can drag the rest of you guys into the sunshine.
I think so. Yeah, that's kind of the goal. So yeah, we thought that we would have a different vibe because of that, and we're not really beholden to anything. Like we're just really doing it just for fun, and we specifically
Exactly.
avoided getting any sponsors or anything like that because, like, I think for casual it's totally fine because you don't have like a particular duty or anything. But like for example, like if you're sponsored by a store, then you should probably say things that help sell cards or whatever. And we decided we didn't want to do that. We just wanted to say exactly what we thought. So
Sure.
yeah, it's like that's something that's really important to us.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why it's like I don't have a partnership with Wizard of the Coast specifically because I want to be able to sit there and say like, "Yo, this wasn't great, but this
Exactly.
was," and it's like, but I mean, it's fine because like nobody, it's as long as you're not like just trashing them, they're okay. Everybody's fine. It's like,
Absolutely.
we're here because we enjoy this because
I
this game
agree.
is fun to play. Like what keeps you playing?
I think the other people, honestly, more than anything else. I think
It's
Magic,
always
like
a gathering,
coming
man.
from, yeah, exactly, coming from Western Australia, especially, it's like the second most isolated capital city in the world. And the most is the one, whatever the capital of Siberia is, right? So
Oh goodness.
I'm pretty sure that's correct. Anyway, someone might fact check me if I'm wrong, but it's very
Yeah.
isolated. It's not that easy to meet a lot of people. Magic kind of gave me that. Like it's such an excellent structure for meeting people, and especially really interesting people. Like Magic
Yes.
filters for intelligent people, interesting people, gives you common ground with them. And so I've met all of my closest friends from Magic, right? So that's
Yeah.
what keeps me coming. Yeah.
That I am 100% in agreement with you. The one problem with that is that all my friends end up being disparately spread throughout the universe.
Same
It's
here.
like,
Yeah.
it's like, damn it, like I wish we could. Like, I was in I was coming home from Chicago and I was hanging out with Covert Go Blue, and we were at the airport together. He's like, "Man, I wish we could just have like an hour to hang out at the airport with random people who are at the Magic Cons with us to just sit and chat the way we don't get to do at the show floor." And I'm like, if I could hang out at an airport with other Magic players, I would probably still be at the airport. We'd just be hanging out all the time, just chilling and chatting. It's I don't know. It's just there's something about being able to like. I love the fact that events have come back and that like Magic Cons have now both the pro side and like the casual side together so that we can sit and just kind of commingle and like really just share the love of this game together. It's really just heartening. And like all these, like when you go to like command fests and stuff too, even like everybody there's just so happy to be there. It's like all the cynicism and like anger on the internet just kind of vaporizes because we're like, look, man, we're here to play cards. It's fun.
I definitely felt that. Like literally the energy, like when for every time, the first time especially, but every time since that I've walked into one of those halls, you can actually feel like the energy. Like,
Isn't
you
it
definitely know
cool?
what I mean, right? Like it's so
Yeah.
different to what you see on Twitter. It's
Oh,
very, very different. You feel it like, wow.
everybody's so excited. Like I went to dinner with Rosewater on Sunday at Chicago, and we were hanging out and we were talking. And he's like, "Man," because I was asking him because he had brought his daughter to the MagicCon, and I was talking to them. I'm like, "So, what did you think?" And he's like, "Everybody here is so much nicer than they are on Twitter." And I'm like, "Yeah, they sure are."
Oh, he
He's like,
definitely
"Nobody."
gets.
Oh God,
Oh, yeah.
like maybe the one person in the world who gets more hate than I do is Mark Rosewater.
Yeah, just wow.
Dude, I mean, the guy, poor. Well, he's a face of Magic.
Yeah.
You said it yourself. He's a face of Magic. That means he's gonna just sit and when people don't like something, he's going to find out
Yeah.
immediately.
He does it
Even
well,
if
though.
it's like nothing to do with him. It's
Yeah.
like, man, people do not let that poor man breathe. But it was nice though, because like he's like at the Magic Cons, everybody's here because they're really happy. They're telling me how this game helped them through bad times or, saved their life or did this, that, the other thing. And I'm like, yeah, this is amazing. Like a kid came up to me during my panel at Chicago and was like, or his mom was like, look, my son is, on the spectrum and has a hard time kind of meeting other kids and like, socializing and adapting. And he listened to your podcast with Wheeler where you two were basically just autodidacts about Magic and talking about this card game all the time. And he feels like, look, there's other people like me out there. And I'm like, That's awesome. I love that. Like if we can make you feel less alone, that's the best possible reward for talking into this microphone all day. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah,
It's
man, this is a
massive. Like
joy.
that's a really nice story. That's actually
Oh
like
god,
very
it
sweet
was
to
it
hear.
was so touching, and he gave me this book that he had drawn of all these like monsters from like magic and stuff that he was like, Ben's monster book for Shivam, and I'm like, this is the greatest
Oh,
gift anybody's ever given me. I
that's
love
awesome.
this. Oh my god, I was teary eyed. It was amazing.
Oh.
Yeah, but it's like that's the sort of thing. It's like, oh yeah, this is fun. We like this.
It's really something else. Yeah, like you get lots of that like lighthearted fun, but also the kind of that stuff
Oh
that's
yeah.
a little bit more, yeah, like you said, heartening, right? Like it's
Oh yeah,
really
it's
feeling deep.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Do you play any Commander?
No, I used to play a lot more. I had like a local group of friends who played, but one of them moved to Canada, and
Mm,
like one of them got really busy. So I don't really play much Commander anymore. I used to though. Something that was really important for me was that I was very intentional about not being very competitive there because it's kind of like what you said, where you're like, I know how to play Commander. For me, I was like, I know how to be competitive. I don't want to do
yeah.
that in Commander. So my favorite deck before was there were partners Togo, Goblin Weaponsmith, and Iktakik.
Mm.
Yeah, so I just loved like trying to do silly things with rocks because I thought it was funny. And something that I figured out recently, actually, that this actually kind of ties into something else that we were talking about, is that a lot of the time, like a lot of pro players like to keep their draft decks from Pro Tours as memento.
Yeah.
And in my day 2 draft at Worlds, my pick one, pack one was Yenna, Red Tooth Regent. And I realized
Mm.
I don't have to keep that as a draft deck. I can actually just turn this draft deck into a commander deck. And then
Oh,
I
I
have like
love
a
that.
really cool memento, right? That I can actually use and play with. And because I think commander is a lot about personal expression. So like this one has like a lot
100%.
of like sentimental value to me. Like a lot of these cards that I'm putting in there are obviously not remotely close to like strong in commander, right? Because
No.
it's my literal draft deck, but they're the ones with the
Yeah.
stamps on them. They're special to
Oh
me.
yeah, that's
So
awesome.
yeah, that's kind of
I
what
love
that's my
that.
current commander deck.
That's fantastic, man. And plus Yenna is awesome. I
Oh yeah.
love that. Like I built a single box deck out of a WoW box. I just like a few friends of mine and I, we'd like to do this thing called Boxing League where we just crack a box and build a deck out of that. It feels sort of like a super sealed deck. Like you're like, oh, because I don't want to get too. It's a good way to cap the power level without going
Mhm.
like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna get every card that's good from history and
Yeah.
my deck's gonna be formulated. No, it's like playing just like a mega draft. You're like all the stuff that's in the set itself. It all works together. It synergizes. It's really fun. And whoa, man, playing a white green enchantress deck in that format is so much fun. I love that. I love that format a lot. I love that
Me
format for
too.
sealed. I love playing for commander. And Yenna is amazing. That's a great story. That's a great idea too, because I've seen a lot of people who were like, "Yeah, this was my draft deck from like PT Oslo or whatever it was." And it's like, that's awesome. But this is a way you can immortalize it and still be able to play it,
Yeah, I
which I
really
love.
enjoyed it, and I mean, honestly, for anyone who's listening who plays in like these Pro Tours, they print enough legendary creatures in every set now. You could probably do it with
Oh my god,
most of the sets going forward, right? So I don't know. I think it's something that I might like to try to do with
that's
a
a
couple
really
of them.
cool idea. I can't believe I never thought about that.
Thank you.
Like that's such a neat. Like I got lucky. A few friends of mine who played in Pro Tours that gave me a bunch of cards that were stamped just because I think that's neat.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, this is. But that's a really man. If I ever get a chance to play in a pro event, I'm totally gonna have to do that because that would be amazing. What a story! I love that.
Thank you.
Um,
I hope it happens.
oh yeah, look. I know where my place in the community is, and my place is probably not at a draft table at the Pro Tour. God willing, though, someday I do like I like playing. I like playing limited a lot, and the problem is I'm not good at playing constructed, and so that's a hard thing to do if you're not good at playing constructed to get on the Pro Tour, since we can't all be Ben Stark and just win the limited PT or whatever.
Yeah.
God, who's your favorite person to play against at the Pro Tour?
Favorite person to play against at the Pro Tour? Well, there's two different ways I could go with this, aren't there? I can name the person that I think is the most likely win, but I think I'll go the other way. I think Simon Nielsen. Honestly, he's just so fun to play against that it doesn't really matter that you're probably going to lose. Honestly, it was a lot of fun. Like when I played against him at Wells, like I knew that it wasn't a good matchup for me, and also he's better than me, and I got crushed, but it still felt great. And that was one where if I won, I would have locked up the top 8 right there. But it still didn't matter because Simon's just that positive to play against. So
yeah, man.
yeah, I guess I'll pick Simon.
He's another guy who's just so much fun to watch because he's just like enjoys himself. I don't know. I like it when Magic players look like they're enjoying themselves. I mean, obviously, Reed Duke is going to be Reed Duke no matter what, and he's always going to
Mhm.
enjoy himself, but he's going to enjoy himself like a monk does, very
Yes.
quietly and like destructively.
He's
But
classy.
yeah, and God, he's good at magic.
Oh
It's
yes,
just not. Oh
incredible.
my God. Anyways, I could sing songs about Reed Duke. Reed Duke is the reason I came back to Magic, so that's why I
Oh
speak so
wow.
highly of him. Because like when I had left Magic and I'd come back, they were doing Worlds in 2011 in San Francisco, where I'm based, and I was like unemployed, and I'd been playing Duels of Planeswalkers, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go Worlds, and I'm sitting there, and who goes to Worlds on a Wednesday? Right, like that's where all like the that's when like Team Finland and Team Japan are sitting there and playing
Yeah.
$5 drafts or whatever, and
Yeah.
just like kicking my ass up and down the street. And I'm like, okay, well, and I had just come back to Magic. Barely knew the basics of drafting, and I'm sitting there that evening, and I've just lost my 50th draft or whatever that day, and I go to and my opponent is like looking at me, he's like, uh, so how are you doing? Like he just swept me, and I'm like, man, I'm just gonna quit Magic. I'm done with this. I don't know how to build a deck, and I'm bad at this. And he's like, well, hang on, let's take a second. And he took a second. He looked through my deck, and he's like, no, you got the fundamentals here. You've got the right curve. You understand how to do this. I would probably. Whoops! I got a little excited there and yanked the cable out of my microphone. Anyway, the point is though, like that kid sat down and helped me like figure out the curve of my deck, figure out how to actually draft and what I'm doing. And he was kind and gave me like half an hour of his time, and obviously he was a competitor, and it was basically Reed Duke when the year he was the Mox World Champion. So he was like the best in like Magic Online, and he spent time out of his day to help teach me how to like actually salvage my drafts and seals and learn how to play limited. And because of that kindness, like I stuck around and I learned to play more. And that's why I'm literally here and one of the people who runs Commander and this and that. The other thing is literally because Reed saw that I was feeling really crappy about how I was doing, and decided to step in and be kind when he did absolutely didn't need to, right? Like after the end of like a limited match or whatever, you shake hands, you go home, you're fine. But no, he was like, dude, I'm going to stop and I'm going to help you because you look like well, not even you look like that's just the kind of person he is. And I was like, that's kind of how I've wanted to model myself ever since. Just like be the type of person who makes people want to come back and play again. Right. Like,
Absolutely. I mean, wow.
yeah.
Just wow. That's an incredible story. I never knew that. But it's so Reed that if you had, yeah, even if we hadn't been talking about Reed before you told that story, I might have guessed. He would have definitely been one of the first names I would have guessed would do that, and
Oh yeah,
that's
100%.
amazing. I mean, yeah, I agree. A lot of us try to be like that. Like you just don't really know how much of an impact this stuff can make, right? Like, yeah,
So in Philly, there were these two kids who were standing there, like they were at the back of the line waiting to meet Josh Lequai, and they saw that I had a badge on that said like a creator or guest or something. And they're like, oh, I've never seen a badge like that before. And I was like, yeah, well, it just means I've got some special privileges to walk around here. Nothing big deal. And we started talking, and I was like, so what are you guys here for? It's like, oh, well, we play Commander, and we've come here to meet Josh and Jimmy, and this is my first time at a Magic event. We just started playing. These are my first decks. And I was listening to them talking. It was super exciting, and they had no idea that I'm like, and all the people around them knew who I was or what I represented for Commander and everything. But I looked at them all, and I was like, don't you guys say a goddamn word. And we sat and we talked, and they were like, man, it would be so cool to meet the people who run Commander someday. I'm like, yeah, probably, but you guys are doing great. And I gave them some tips and and looked through the decks and made them feel good about themselves. And then I left. And then like a few minutes later, I just hear this loud just yell. And like, cause one of the dudes like, by the way, that's one of the guys who helps run the thing. And it's like, what? And one of those dudes came up to me in Chicago later and was like, hey man, thank you for making those kids' day. And I'm like, wow, you remember from like a year ago or whatever? That's amazing. And it's just like those are
awesome.
the things that just like they stick with you, and it's so heartening. Like this
Yes,
can be great when it wants to be.
absolutely. Just that's kind of life. Yeah, it's just it doesn't cost you much to do it, and sometimes it's just massive, and you get paid back. Maybe you get paid back later. Maybe you don't. Doesn't really matter though. You did
Right,
something
it
good,
doesn't
right?
matter. Yeah, exactly. You made someone's day. It's fine. Everything's good.
Yeah,
Relax and enjoy it. But anyways, man, thank you so much for joining me. I know it's kind of weird and I messed up the time schedule for you, but
that's all
I
good.
really appreciate you coming on, man. And I wish you the best of luck. And are you going to be coming to Seattle for the next PT?
Yeah, I flew out in just under a week, actually.
Oh,
So,
goodness.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I guess
really
by the time
addicting.
this goes out, you will have done that. So
Yes.
uh,
Thank
hopefully
you
I
so
will
much
see
for
you in
having me.
Amsterdam then.
Yeah, I
Oh, yeah,
appreciate so much
absolutely,
that
man.
you asked me on. This was I really enjoyed this. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so if folks wanted to find you or your content, where could they go?
You can find me on at MTGBentcard on Twitter, and you can probably find me indirectly through Mangu's Twitter as well. So
Yeah.
Mangu09, that works too.
And if you go to YouTube and look up the Karnies, you will find this podcast that I greatly enjoy listening to. It's a lot of fun. And I wish you guys all the best of luck with that too. Um,
Thank you very much.
yeah, but with that, as always, my friends, you can find me at Gearport Gears. You can find this podcast anywhere podcasts are sold, or at YouTube every Tuesday, thanks to my editor, Dan. And you can find me on Shivam and Wheeler Love Magic or on the Chronicles of Dragonlance because I've got nothing better to do but talking to a microphone. Thanks to my sponsors, Architect and Quiver, and you can support me at my patreon.com/ShivanB. And remember, my friends, it's not magic without the gathering, and we'll see you next time.